So, hi Courtney, hi Callie. Welcome to this Q&A about your film Invention. First of all, congratulations to such a smart, sensible, and intimate creation. As a member of the audience, I was feeling quite grateful to be able to watch your artistic approach to this deeply personal grieving process. How did the idea of creating such a movie, especially as a shared project, first come up?
Well, Courtney, do you want to answer that?
Go for it.
How did it come up? I guess, well, I was like renting a house in upstate last year, and I was trying to make like as mo many movies as I could in a year, kind of just as a personal whatever, I don't know. And I don't know, and then Courtney and I had known each other for a long time, but like not seen each other for a long time from like 10 years ago. Um, and then ran into each other at a Hong Sang-soo screening, and then I was my dad had passed, and I had sort of like a loose idea of a movie that maybe it could be made. And then when Courtney and I started talking, she lost her father, and so it seemed like for some reason we exchanged books. The books were very similar, and then we started talking, and then we knew we were going to make a Dead Dads movie, but I don't think that we really knew we were going to make this movie until we kind of just started making it. That's my quick answer.
Um, Courtney, sorry.
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Okay. Yeah, about the movie exchange you did. I read about this in an interview that you gave to Filmmaker magazine. Can you elaborate on that? In what ways have these books been influential to your film?
The book exchange. So, yeah, we said, I mean, I think at this point it was still, things were still up in the air, and I think we were trading books to say, like, actually, maybe this book should be adapted, you know? Um, but in the end, they ended up kind of informing us as far as, I think, sensibility. The books were, um, Callie gave me a book by Renata Adler called Pitch Dark, and I gave her a book by Helen Weinswig called Basic Black with Pearls. And both of the books are kind of experimental novels about women in grief, but both of them are about kind of grieving a lover, kind of grieving. Is that right? Is Pitch
Yeah.
Dark? Yeah, they're about grieving the end of a relationship, um, and kind of, but the grieving processes were what were interesting. It's like the grief is sends both of these writers, women characters into these a kind of, I don't know, the sort of symphonic state of entering other narrative spaces, and you sort of are jumping into almost like different novels or different kind of possibilities for the form. So it was interesting because they're different, but they were so similar in terms of kind of thinking through what is it to grieve in a form of fantasy or genre, to kind of use the container of genre play to take yourself out of a situation that you can't handle. And I think that ended up being, yeah, like, really primary to the film.
Um,
We exchanged those books too without knowing what the other one was gonna like. We just both were like, we really both like these books, and if we couldn't adapt something, this is what we would do. And
yeah,
then when we, started reading each other's books, we're like,
yeah.
this is sort of the same concept, in a sense, so it was a pleasant surprise too. Because it was just like completely random, two books, and then they ended up being, it was great because so I would say it definitely it informed that we were on the right path, that we both wanted to make a similar movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really, really fascinating.
So
Courtney, you were mentioning that, but This is the second time we're talking to each other. The first time was about your movie TERRA FEMME 2 years ago. These two movies are very different since TERRA FEMME is a documentary and Invention has this fictional storyline to it. Was it in any shape or form more challenging to create Invention as a mixture of genres, and if so, how?
Yeah, it was definitely outside of like what my normal kind of playground is, and which I think is usually pretty based in editing and based in kind of working with materials that already exist. So definitely here we were creating materials, and one of the big challenges was that we shot on film, which I don't regret, but it did make shooting complicated because you just couldn't, we didn't have a lot of film. And so you kind of had to, if not get it right, you had to kind of commit to whatever you had done because we couldn't do that many options on the day. So, um, yeah, but I mean, I think more than anything, it was, I'm often working in a realm of like ideas and history and things that are emotional on some level, but not, the surface on them of them is usually not exploring emotions. And here I felt like we were, and even the other cast members, I mean, everyone who came in, everyone was at some level, even though we were, putting little, there are ideas inside the movie and there's commentary on even political things, but ultimately everybody was drawing from emotion and experience, and so yeah, that's just a different field to work in, and I was grateful to be inside of that, though it was a different kind of, yeah, it was a different kind of shaping.
Yeah. Your movie begins with this jukebox electronic organ kind of thing being played, and the song choices throughout the film stay somewhat similar to this type of sound. My question is, what inspired this choice of instrumental effects in the movie?
I mean, I think we were thinking about, I mean, the funeral home was a central kind of, I feel like at times we would think about maybe the film is all a kind of dream coming out from this meeting with this attorney or this moment in the funeral home, that maybe everything inside the movie is a kind of microcosm inside a kind of daydream inside these spaces. So I think that we wanted that funeral home music to kind of cascade through the film. So there's a lot of organ music in the film, but I think also the organ is a little bit like the machine. It's sort of this electric, you know, wave machine that is generating music instead of light. But what do you think, Cal? I mean, I also just like that it was, we saw it in the funeral home where we filmed, which was a real funeral home, obviously, and it was just sort of funny that they had a remote control organ. I mean, I think that kind of solemn, solemn, pious stuff that's also kind of robotic is maybe just like a sense of humor that we kind of share.
Yeah, I think we both just definitely, at least tonally, I don't know, the whole realm of like, especially this sort of like niche medical realm of, medical technology and things like that. It's like, I don't know, I think that I don't know, I think we just I think we also knew that we didn't want anything to feel too heavy-handed, and also like tonally, just speaking specifically tonally, but um that entrance was all Courtney. The organ stuff was great. Just set the silly to, like, I don't know. I think people also, when your dad's not dead, and I don't know, people don't always know that they can laugh. They can laugh or something, and so it was almost like giving permission, from the get-go, this is, you don't have to, you don't have to, we don't have to skirt around anything with it. I don't know.
Yeah, that like, I don't know, there's a pathetic quality
Yeah, yeah.
most things, but
Yeah.
certainly in, you know, trying to look after legacy sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
So initially the jukebox was there first, and then the whole soundtrack came from that jukebox electric organ kind of thingy.
Well, the
Well, we
soundtrack, no.
altered songs in the organ, but
Sorry, I didn't get that.
oh, well, I mean, we were in control of those songs,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Another thing I realized throughout the film, you implemented these negative images of the ocean and waves, and also this 3D model of a castle. Can you tell me more about these visuals and what it's all about?
I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting because so Callie's, you know, this archive that we had of Callie's dad is from the late 90s, kind of early aughts, which is such a fascinating time to engage with, look into. I mean, I think it's not we've I mean, I guess culturally that time period is in the air right now, but as an archive, it's a sort of strange time because it's not so far away that you feel that it's really the past, and yet it is. I mean, and yet we can, I think we do experience it as, I think at least for us in our lives and, you know, like the time periods of our childhoods as a different time. So I think some of that sort of TV, cable world graphics was sort of meant to, yeah, feel like a space of sort of digital exploration that's like somewhere between the internet and kind of cable TV, like advertising, public access, like lo-fi world. So um, I think yeah, I mean, Callie can speak more to this, but you know, it was her and I had different levels of exposure to kind of this entire sort of new age world of that time period, you know, that was really, you know, something that her dad was involved with and engaging with. So, kind of the fumes from that were, we were interested in, you know, how that had shifted in 20 years, you know, where that had gone, you know, this sort of like alternative medicine world and this world of alternative information, like what the internet had done to that, and how that had kind of entered a different space of information sharing and what that information has turned in, especially with COVID. So yeah, anyways, I think we were trying to point to like that's the place where this is coming from. You know, that's the place where this information is emanating from, is kind of inside this kind of media world that has like become a sort of digital internet world, without kind of being hyper online as a as an aesthetic. So um,
Yeah. I think that's also why it's like the machine itself was such a, I don't know, when I yeah, I think the machine itself was such a conduit, so to speak, quite literally, but also like, you know, I think when there was a lot of experimentation with finding different archive for different things, you know, because we were already working with, you know, my real dad's actual archive, but then to try and, you know, what was this thing, you know, this machine, how was it acting as a conduit, and where do you go in that sort of space? And so when exploring and like that, trying to figure out the you know, the graphics and the feeling and stuff, it's like the that's where it sort of was entering fantasy, I suppose, in a way where also it ties into, I mean, grief is sort of like you long for a fantasy for sure, you know, as a way out or something. So I don't know, I think it was just like it made sense at some point that, oh, okay, that's like this limbo, that this world, you know, this like opening, you know, sort of sounds and feels, and you know, just there's a lot of experimentation, I think, with finding that. Um,
And that it's a national fantasy, you know. I mean, like some of those images, you know, that are not as like kind of animated, otherworldly are just like American TV, and this I don't know, this yeah, this sort of thing that is making everyone sick, kind of feeling. Because I don't know if you saw, there's a Letterboxd review, Callie, that said it's as though she went to Oz and came back and everybody was gone. um, or
That
everybody was,
almost sounds so pathetic, which I love.
or everybody else was busy grieving their own thing, or was yeah, it was something interesting that I read the other day. Um,
Went to
but yeah,
Oz, booked. Yeah.
sometimes I think of that scene inside the machine as like a rock tumbler where, you know, you're trying to smooth out the rocks, but like that's kind of what the TV effect is doing.
Yeah. Some of the archive, like the TV archive too, is like pulled from those tapes, from
Yeah,
actual like things from the tapes, like commercials and whatever. Um,
from her dad's shows. Yeah.
yeah, one way or another.
Yeah, so the thing is, after I first saw your film, I was quite touched, and then I did my research and I was going through all the interviews you guys gave, and I was even more moved. And this one question continued to pop up in my mind because I feel like making a movie about personal loss and grief is one thing, but continuously talking about it with strangers like me and going into detail must be quite challenging. Is talking about the movie somehow valuable to your mourning process, or are you looking forward to not having to talk about your dead dads to random strangers anymore?
I mean, the thing is, um, are your parents alive?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like this weird, it's this weird kind of almost sick thing where, um, well, when you lose somebody, like you're excited to talk about them, you know, you get uh you get to talk about them, especially with other people who have had loss. Like, Courtney and I get this access to um a shorthand of like avoiding any kind of social mines or anything, of just being able to just talk about our dads. No, I mean, I'll never get sick of talking about my dad. Um, I Yeah, it wasn't like re-traumatizing and it's not like re-traumatizing or something to talk about it. It's like almost like you get to celebrate, and I'm just grateful that we get to talk about it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably evidence that we are also fascinated by our own grief. I mean, I know. I mean, I know I am a little bit. It feels like yeah, it's a thing that enters your life, you know, instead of the person, and so it's big. There's enough of it to crawl around within, I think.
It's
And
true too, 'cause it's like I don't know, because Courtney lost her father um longer, you know. Um, how many
17 years,
years? How many?
seven, 17 years, 17
Wow.
years. Ago.
Wow. Wow, yeah, 17. Yeah, wow, 17 years. And mine's, it's interesting too, because it's like I used to joke with Courtney that I wanted to start a podcast that was just a dead dad's podcast where but I was really fascinated in like it's true. Not even my own grieving process, just like what happens when it's 17 years versus like 6 years versus, if it's long term, if you're grieving for a long time when the person is still alive versus, if it happens quite suddenly, which it did for me and it did for Courtney as well. And I don't know. I think that there's something like just endlessly fascinating as just a person, not even with our own grief, but necessarily just that's where kind of conspiracy started seeping into started becoming making itself apparent as like a theme in the film, because even as we're reading these books, you know, the original book exchange, and also, you know, I was maybe perhaps way more or very exposed to this very specific world from a very young age for a long time, but it's like it's all the same thing, you know, and that became very apparent. It's like this, that's how we kind of sort of not stumbled into conspiracy as a sort of container for grief, but also it was just kind of like, yeah, what is this? Like, you know, kind of turning knobs and seeing when things come in and why they come in and when they leave and why they leave, and sort of how really at the center of all of it is like just this kind of like the intersection of like where hopelessness and hopefulness sort of meet, you know, and it yeah, I don't know, I guess it's true, we are like, I guess I suppose a little narcissistic in that we're interested in our own grief process, but it's also like I'm interested in everybody's grief process. It's like it's so universal and so vastly different and hits different with different people at different times. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, I think.
But you know, what, I'm sorry.
No. Okay.
Well, I was just going to say that, like, one thing that we were talking about a lot, there was a specificity of daughters and fathers, you know, that is a particular kind of loss, that there's, I don't know, there's elements of that relationship and also what it means in the world to sort of lose the father, you know, that is sort of bigger than the individual relationship, you know, and has to do with all the kind of realities or illusions of protection of, you know, the sort of like, I don't know, paternalistic form, and I think that's what kind of also led to these ideas about the country and about other, you know, of course the movie is full of these interactions with other men and how they are disappointing, or, you know, how they are trying but sort of missing, and or you know, or I don't know, leading her astray, but in different ways, kind of performing the role of you know, the guy, and sometimes sort of a, you know, loosely father figure roles and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't just general grief, you know. I do think that that was what connected us, is this like particular grief that puts you in it puts you, I think, in a different relationship to the world. I mean, that's my feeling. And you know, and losing a mother would be a whole different set of, I think, emotional coordinates.
Definitely.
Yeah, okay. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for taking your time. Much appreciation from the whole Transit team and me. We are looking forward to your next projects, and maybe until then.
We hope to see you next time in Europe.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Okay,
Feel better.